Hello and welcome to Let's Paint Some Sea. In this watercolour demonstration I'll be using pure watercolour and some watercolour pencils. To start with, I'm going to be using an indigo watercolour pencil just to map out some marks where I would like there to be some rocks and the basic outline of the composition. So top right is where there's going to be more rocks, and bottom left currently, I probably end up turning this all around, is also going to be where there's some rocks. I'm now going to put some clean water using my number 14, size 14 sable. I do use SAAs, their sables are fantastic, and a sable this size holds so much fluid so that it's you're not going backwards and forwards the whole time to keep filling your brush. So you can see I'm moving my brush around very quickly. I'm trying to map out, or I am mapping out, where I want there to be lots of water and a few splashes, look, just to add interest and vigour to the painting. Lots of energy going into this piece. Purely inspired by the Cornish coast. I particularly like Cape Cornwall. Priest Cove is one of my favourites. So now I'm going to use a really old, this is a nylon brush, about an inch brush I believe. This is also an SAA brush, and I'm going to be using cerulean and cobalt turquoise light. Now the colour is quite dense. It doesn't look like I've got very much in my palette, but there's quite a bit on my brush, and I go in with great gusto. You see, adding this into the wetted areas, allowing the pigment to release onto the wetted areas and move around with ease and flow. I do like to create a loose style. There's that cobalt turquoise light coming out. This is a Winsor & Newton colour. Fabulous, very opaque, but beautiful, beautiful sea colour. And you see now I tip the paper or the support just to help the water move the pigments around to get some really interesting marks. Love those little marks down toward the bottom corner right, very nice. So now we're going in with a smaller brush. This is a 1/2 inch. This is my nylon Pro Art, and I've got in with ultramarine, and I love putting some really strong ultramarine into little places. Something really gorgeous about this colour. And because I've wetted the paper in certain areas, the pigments will move around and blend and flow as watercolour does so beautifully. Now going into some burnt sienna. So burnt sienna and French ultramarine together make a fabulous dark, but and again, they're both semi-opaque or opaque, and they blend to, they split and make fantastic colours. So now I'm getting the two of them onto the brush. One side blue, one side burnt sienna, and that gives a very interesting effect. And saves you popping back into the palette every now and again. Using a flat brush, and you see the pigment's quite dry, there's not a lot of water on my brush. That helps to give more depth to the painting. And you can decide whether you want more blue or you want more burnt sienna, so it gives a more orangey effect. So the choice is yours, play around and have fun. I like to have quite the blend, quite the mix. I've got a really dark mix here. This is ultramarine, burnt sienna, and a little bit of opera rose in there. You can see a very, very dark colour. Bring it back to life by adding some water. It's always a good idea to mix your paints before you start painting, because it's amazing how quickly your painting evolves once you start. And if you have to keep stopping to mix more pigments, more paints, you lose the spontaneity. So now I'm going in with my big brush back to my size 14, and just see I'm using the tip of my brush to allow that pigment to dance over the paper. When you're working wet into wet, of course, the pigments all separate and split, which gives a very pleasing effect, in my opinion. Back to the ultramarine and the burnt sienna to give more depth and contrast. You can see how wonderful this contrast is already between the very pale cerulean and cobalt turquoise light, with these combination of these dark colours using burnt sienna and French ultramarine. And I'm beginning to build my composition, the rocks, and this is obviously an aerial perspective, looking down upon the scene, which I often do when I'm up at Cape Cornwall. Now I'm adding some more of those, the combination of the turquoise the cobalt turquoise light and the cerulean. And if you add that into those rocks, that just gives a nice blend rather than it all being separate and sitting there looking very, very separate. You see the movement I'm beginning to create. So I'm tipping the support again. I'm working on Saunders Waterford paper on a gummed pad. This is so convenient because it's already stretched, so it saves you a job. A super, super paper allows you to work quite wet, which is wonderful. So here we are with another one of my watercolour pencils. So I've dunked it into a little bit of water so it releases the pigment a bit more, but you can start forming nice shapes, interesting shapes. It helps you to work out where you want your rocks to be and the design taking place. Oh, look at these great big things. These are called Stabilo, and these are also watercolour pencils, but now we're getting that contrast with the orange and the bluey turquoise, which works so very well on the colour palette. So I'm dancing around, just trying my best, trying to just dance around, find out what works, what doesn't work. See, I'm twiddling my Stabilo on the side so I get bigger marks. More pigment is released onto the support, the wetted support. You can see how very quickly you can start to get a very pleasing representation of the Cornish coast, any coast really. All much of the same, aren't they? Love the way the pigments move around. And it's interesting, I think a lot of people are still scared of watercolours, but basically you're in control and you can make it do whatever you want. You can lift out, you can dab out, you can add, as I'm about to, there you are, with a bit of tissue. Kimwipe this is called. It's quite harsh, but you can see how it lifts out some interesting marks, so you get some sort of more granulation within the rocks. I take a moment every now and again just to assess, just have a little look and think, where do I want to go next? How's it working? So I now decided to just take a little bit of that pigment out in the middle. So all that adding to the direction of the water flow, the sea. And if you feel you've taken out too much, that's fine, because you can put some more back in. And I'm just softening some of the edges. As you assess, as you're watching as your painting reveals itself to you, you can decide where you want to just soften some edges or dry a bit, whatever it is that the painting desires of you. So it does talk to you. See, I love that direction I'm starting to create. A little bit more depth of colour going in there. Oh, and some splotches. Has to be done. Well, we are at the coast after all said and done, so splatter away. Make sure you haven't got any good clothes on and you're not near a really clean wall. My eye is dancing around the whole time, assessing where I want to put the next brush mark, the next mark with my pencils. And you can assess all you like. You see I've added a wee bit of pink in that little section there. So I do hope you've enjoyed this little demonstration and do have fun doing one yourself. Bye for now.